1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm on the primary. I'm on primary.
Victor, mic check. Anchor mic, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're gonna just cue you. Do you need? Can you get on Unity? I can get it if I need to.
She's trying to get Hobby. She said to keep talking, but she just got off the phone.
In the industry. You hear it?
On Unity?
Yeah.
No, I have it turned up.
Oh.
Hello.
The hit's about to take place.
She said she'd call me back.
Marcos is trying to get on right now. Yeah, because I have Marcos with me. That's why I didn't grab Unity right away. I think we're out of time now for me to go get it. How far out are we? Just kind of waiting. Okay. I think he's working on it.
I don't hear anything. I'm on Unity, but I don't hear anything.
Do you want to use my login?
There you go.
Okay.
Then I can hear him on Unity now. But I don't have earbuds connected to this shit.
That's okay. Just let them know we're ready.
How do I...
Press to talk. Yeah.
Hey, I'm ready, guys. I got you.
Well, guys, the governor's trip is timely. West Texas crude sits just under $53, and the oil and gas
I can
industry.
hear you. Mic check, Daniel.
Mic check, mic check, mic check.
I hear you.
We interrupt your regular news. Thanks for joining us. I'm Victor Lopez.
And I'm Crystal Cruz. Governor Greg Abbott is in Odessa today for a roundtable discussion on the state's economy as well as the oil and gas industry.
That's right, Crystal. The governor will actually hear from oil and gas workers, energy leaders, and advocates in the area on how the state can continue to support the industry and the workers during this COVID pandemic.
Well, we have our live coverage team with Dana Morris and Jonathan Polasic on the governor's visit. But first, let's check in with Dana for the latest. Dana.
Well, guys, here at CUD Energy Services, the roundtable discussion with the governor has started. That will be followed by a press conference, and we'll be updating you through everything that we hear. You can watch it live on News West 9 as well. Now, the governor's trip is timely. West Texas crude sits just under $53. While the industry as a whole, the oil and gas industry, has been steadily rebounding after a pandemic-fueled crash. But now it's been a little bit of a flux in the last couple of days after a flurry of executive orders by President Joe Biden aiming at climate change and, in effect, affecting the oil and gas industry. We know that the Texas side of drilling, as it's mainly all private lands, won't be affected, but there are still questions about restrictions on greenhouse gas emissions, as well as federal subsidies for oil and gas companies being pooled. So these are definitely questions that are going to be discussed at that roundtable, and we hope to hear the answers from the governor once that roundtable discussion has wrapped up and we get into the press conference. We'll be streaming that press conference live right here on News West 9, and we'll certainly have a recap after it's all taken place. For now, we're going to go inside and see what we can and listen to the governor as much as we can and get and talk about that roundtable discussion that's taking place. Reporting in Odessa, Dana Morris, News West 9.
All right, thanks, Dana. Well, in his first day of office, President Joe Biden issued several executive orders involving the nation's oil and gas industry. One measure was to revoke a key cross-border permit on the Keystone XL pipeline. Also, in another executive order, he put a 60-day freeze on oil and gas drilling permits on federal and public lands. The measures are likely to limit a developing oil and gas trading relationship between the U.S. and Canada. It would also increase the need for imports. Now, this order doesn't restrict any current oil and gas permits already placed on those federal lands for the next 60 days. It's seen as a sign by many in the industry there are more restrictions to come.
And Midland Mayor Patrick Payton also talked about the state of oil and gas here in our area this week. He touched on the issues and concerns that people might have had when they heard about the president's announcement.
Yeah, some of those concerns included the fact that the U.S. still needs the oil and gas industry to help continue power the country, even if we start moving to goods such as electric cars and other similar products.
Until we get to a place where we are going to recognize that the oil and gas industry is the backbone of powering this country, that we can also together move forward with the oil and gas industry that provides the byproducts, that provide for the electric vehicles, that provide for the buses that were just mentioned, that drive the factories that are going to produce the steel.
Now, Mayor Payton did say that both sides of this issue need to come together and have a conversation that doesn't demonize the oil and gas industry because of how it will continue to move not only our region, but the whole country moving forward.
Well, another main takeaway from Mayor Payton is for people to understand what our region contributes to the entire country. That's in terms of oil and gas production, jobs, and ultimately stimulating the economy.
Well, the pause on new drilling permits will not have a major effect on Texas, as you said, Crystal. However, New Mexico is a different story. This new pause doesn't have a timetable, but it will extend past that initial 60 days. Now, in Texas, the majority of lands are private. With a suspension on drilling in other states, economists believe that could mean more drilling here and increase the demands for intrastate pipelines.
I do think that you're likely to see the companies looking more and more to drill in the areas here in Texas. I think another thing that comes into play there, obviously there's going to be more regulation on pipelines as well. I don't think we have to get this oil down to the Gulf Coast and out to the world. And when it's drilled in Texas, those become intrastate pipelines.
Now, all current leases on federal lands will stay in place. Economists believe as this moratorium plays out, it could actually shake up our county's supply and demand for oil.
Well, one of the things that we really want to discuss, and it's a big concern we've heard a lot of people here in West Texas talking about, is jobs. And kind of give you a perspective of what's going on right now. For several months in a row, Odessa actually had the highest unemployment rate in the state.
That's right.
We took a look at the current numbers from December. That's what we were able to get from the Texas Workforce Commission. And here's something interesting to note. So unemployment in Midland sits at 8%. In December of 2020. You round it back a year ago, it was just 2%. Odessa, they sit right now at 11.5% in their unemployment rate. A year ago, same time in December in 2019, they were sitting at 2.9%. Right now, Odessa's unemployment rate is the second high in the state. It's only beaten out by Edinburgh. They're like 11.7, so they're 0.2% higher, but you know, that is a real concern. The Texas unemployment rate is 7.2%, so really Midland and Odessa are the highest unemployment rates, some of them in the state.
Okay, and now I think we are actually ready. As Dana mentioned earlier, we're getting ready to go into that round table. Let's go now live to Odessa with Dana Morris.
Actually,
Okay,
we're going to wait just a moment.
right.
He's still sitting in on that press conference trying to get some more information. I know a lot of you are interested, a lot of you working in the oil and gas industry. We'll get to him in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back.
audio?
They're going to set a couple of mics down here.
Hello, everyone. We're breaking into your programming for some breaking news. Governor Greg Abbott has just wrapped up his roundtable discussion in Odessa, where they were talking about oil and gas and our economy.
And as we told you before, we do have team coverage on that. We have Jonathan Polasic and Dana Morris. Let's go now to Governor Abbott, who is addressing the people at that conference.
Input about challenges they face and needs they have from the state of Texas as we move forward into this legislative session in our efforts to make Texas a more prosperous state. And part of being a prosperous state begins with protecting the most important sector we have in the state of Texas, and that is our energy sector. Let me recount for you a comment made by Jesus Macias earlier. He said that one thing that he and his peers want, the blue-collar workers who are working on the front lines every single day in the energy sector, they need to know that they're going to continue to have a job. And he pointed out that it's a mistake, it's wrong for a president or anybody else to act like, well, their job can be ended today and they just can be retrained to do some other job. That's just not how real life works. And it's certainly not how it works for them to be able to pay their bills and take care of their families and buy the food they need, etc. And so we're not here in the state of Texas to say that people need to change jobs. We're here for a singular purpose today. I'm in Midland to make clear that Texas is going to protect the oil and gas industry from any type of hostile attack launched from Washington, D.C. President Biden's embrace of the Green New Deal is a job killer in Texas. It also takes a wrecking ball to the energy independence that Texas has been able to provide to the United States of America. And Texas is not going to stand idly by and watch the Biden administration kill jobs in Midland, in Odessa, or any other place across the entire region. Now, the way we're going to respond to this is multifold. One thing that we are going to be doing is exactly what I did when I was the Attorney General of Texas and Barack Obama was the President of the United States, when President Obama was lodging challenge after challenge after challenge to the energy sector. When I was the Attorney General of Texas, I filed 31 lawsuits against the Obama administration, most of which were against actions taken by the Obama administration EPA. Texas will continue with that litigation strategy to fight back against any efforts by the Biden administration that threaten either the energy sector in general or jobs in the energy sector in particular in the state of Texas. And we will continue with that, but I have something today that is going to aid that process. I have with me an executive order that I'm about to sign that will direct every state agency to use all lawful powers and tools to challenge any federal action that threatens the strength, the vitality, or the independence of the energy industry in Texas. I'll show it to you, and then I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from it and then sign it here today. Here's the executive order. And a couple of paragraphs says this: whereas the energy industry is vital to economic growth in the state of Texas, fueling prosperity for all Texans by creating jobs and expanding trade. whereas hundreds of thousands of Texans are employed in the energy industry, whereas billions of dollars in taxes and royalties flow to the state of Texas every year, thanks to the hard work and innovation of the energy industry, helping to pay for schools, roads, and other services. And whereas continued success of Texas's energy industry will aid our smooth recovery from COVID-19, both here and across the country, because Texas is the economic engine of America and source of its energy security. And whereas regulatory overreach in the energy sector can damage the stability of the Texas economy and the livelihoods of countless Texans, and whereas on his very first day in office, President Biden signaled extreme hostility toward the energy industry and toward Texas by rejoining the job-killing Paris Agreement and signing Executive Order 13990. And whereas more and greater threats to the Texas energy sector seem imminent as President Biden embraces Green New Deal policies. I therefore, by the authority invested in me as governor in the Constitution and laws of the state of Texas, direct every state agency to use all lawful powers and tools to challenge any federal action that threatens the continued strength, vitality, and independence of the energy industry. Each state agency should work to identify potential litigation, notice and comment opportunities, and any other means of preventing federal overreach within the law. And when they do that, that will arm Texas to be prepared to fight back. This is a homework assignment for every state agency in Texas. But listen, that's just one approach. Let me mention something else that I was prepared for before I got here. But during the course of our roundtable discussion, this very issue was raised as one of the issues that they are urging the state of Texas to address. Because the issue is this: it's not just the federal government that is threatening the energy sector. Local governments around the country, and maybe even some here in Texas, are acting to derail the oil and gas industry and raise energy costs for families. One notable example is that in cities like San Francisco, they are banning natural gas in new buildings. That includes things like stoves, ovens, furnaces, water heaters, etc. In Texas, we will not let cities use political correctness to dictate what energy source you use. So I am supporting legislation that prohibits cities and counties from banning natural gas appliances. There were some other things that were discussed around the table today, and I'm going to mention several of them that are very important. One was the importance of not double regulating the industry. People need to understand that regulations cost money, and the more regulations there are, the higher your energy cost is going to be. And there are regulations coming from the federal government that would need to be fought back against. The last thing that the energy sector needs is to have additional regulations either from the state level or the local level. So it's more than just doubling. It could be the tripling or quadrupling of regulations that just make it impossible for a particular industry to operate. And I want everybody around this table to know that we will be fighting back against any doubling or tripling of regulations. In fact, my goal is to go back to Austin, Texas, and find ways to cut regulations to make it easier for the oil and gas industry to do business in Texas. Another point that was made repeatedly is something that I knew about before I got here today, and that is there are unique needs to this region to better improve roadways, transportation ways, and highways, etc. You look at what's behind me. This is an enormous, you call it a vehicle, or Clint, what do you call that?
That's a piece of equipment.
Well, it's more than a piece of equipment. Anyway, this goes on the roadway, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, and there's the truck for it. So this takes a high quality level of road to make sure it's going to be able to navigate the roadway to get to where it needs to be. And the Texas Department of Transportation is working with leaders in the Midland, Odessa areas to make sure that they're going to have the transportation infrastructure they need, not only to help big rigs like this get to where they need to be, but to help moms and dads and families be able to traverse the area in very safe ways. Also, we talked about something that's hugely important for the future of the state of Texas in general, but applying it to this region, UT Permian Basin has job-skilled training programs that are important for the energy sector. Some may be important to other sectors. But I want to underscore the importance that the state of Texas puts into these job training programs, knowing how prolifically they can change and alter and improve the lives of the people who get that training, but also how essential that training is for the employers that want to hire those employees. Another thing that was mentioned were some current concerns that were raised about neighboring states at the state level beginning to come up with legislative proposals that could impose Green New Deal type policies in those states, and wanting to make sure that would not happen in Texas. And I made clear to them, I'll tell you what I told them. I said, if anybody passes a Green New Deal type policy in Texas, it will be met with a governor's veto and not become law in our state. And then the last thing is, and I didn't mention this to you guys earlier, but this is something that I've already announced, but I just want to make sure that the business operators around here know about my commitment to these policies. Over the course of the past year, businesses like these have been open during the pandemic, and they've been providing good paying jobs and providing energy for the entire state of Texas. The point is this. I want to see, I'm talking to our legislators now, I want to see a bill get to my desk as quickly as possible, providing civil liability protection for any business in the state of Texas that opens safely, that operated safely, to make sure that they will not be in the crosshairs of lawsuits that could put them out of business. Another thing that's important that we learned over the course of the pandemic, and that is the vital role that broadband plays in our lives. We've seen it prolifically in schools, and about schools early, and so much of learning these days is taking place through Zoom classes. We've seen it in businesses. We've seen it in medicine through the use of telemedicine. Unfortunately, not all areas of the state of Texas have the same access to broadband access, and we need to correct that this session. We want to make sure every zip code across the entire state of Texas has full, equal, and robust access to broadband access. And then the last thing is that over the course of the pandemic, there were some regulations that were cut in order to help businesses make ends meet. One example is we authorized alcohol to go to assist restaurants to be able to stay open and continue to operate. Another thing that we did is we authorized the greater use of telemedicine so that patients would be able to see doctors in easier ways. Regulations like those that were modified during the course of the pandemic, we need to consider making them permanent laws in the state of Texas in the upcoming session. And then I'll close it out with this before I pass it to Travis Stice. And that is just to update you real quick on some very encouraging news today concerning the pandemic. Today, we provided more vaccinations than any other day during the course of the pandemic. We provided 133,459 vaccinations in one day. And today, we now went over the 2 million mark of vaccinations administered in the state of Texas. With that, I'm going to pass it to Travis. We're going to have a few other speakers, and then we will take some questions.
Thank you, Governor, and thanks again for coming out here today, and thanks for your dynamic role in not only leading our state in the pandemic, but also being on the forefront of energy, which we know is so important. We talked about earlier what has gone on in the Permian Basin over the last several years is a generational gift to our country, to our state, and that is in the form of energy independence. And that energy independence means that we no longer have to rely on receiving imported barrels from countries that quite honestly don't like Americans. And there's not a barrel of oil that's produced in the state of Texas that a person doesn't touch. And we need to make sure that as we produce these barrels, we keep in mind the men and women that are on the front lines. You heard of several today. And we appreciate the grit and determination that they have, and that we also honor the fact that we are now energy independent, which we haven't been, and it was an unheard of dream just a few years ago. The pandemic effect out here in the Permian Basin was catastrophic. I know it was around the world. Unemployment went from almost zero this time last year, it's hard to believe, to during the depths of the pandemic, we had unemployment between 15 and 20% out here. And now as we've got optimism around the vaccine and the worldwide economies are starting to open up and the demand for the product that we produce is starting to increase, unemployment, the industry is slowly coming back to life. And I'm here to tell you, as represented not only the 800 employees at Diamondback, but I'm telling you that the men and women of this industry stand in the breach to be able to lead our country, our state, out of the economic crisis that was caused by the pandemic. So thank you again, Governor, for coming out here today.
Thank you, Travis. And now we have Clint Walker with Cut Energy.
Well, thank you, Governor. I can't do any better than what your executive order just described. I mean, that's great. I hope we get all those things done. Cut Energy Services is a service company that supplies hydraulic fracturing, coil tubing, snubbing, well control, a whole host of things that they need at the wellhead. And like I was telling the governor earlier, you know, when oil went to negative $37 a barrel, Travis is not going to be drilling wells. And when he's not drilling wells, that I can't make him do that. And so, unfortunately, we had to go through a lot of layoffs and furloughs and do things we had to do to survive. And we've done that. The hydraulic fracturing process is the majority cost of the well cycle now. And in order to do that, it takes people that are very specialized and highly trained and committed, and it also takes a specialized piece of equipment to do that. You see this piece of equipment behind me. This is just one of 20 that could be on the location, not to mention all the other ancillary equipments and, you know, the other services, whether it be water, tools, pump down, the wireline. It's a very complicated business, and it creates a lot of value, a lot of revenue for the state of Texas. Talk about this piece of equipment. It was assembled in Houston by Stewart and Stevenson. Talk about the radiator here. It was manufactured in Houston. You look at that pump. It was manufactured in Fort Worth, Texas. I mean, there is a lot of monetary creation right here in the state of Texas. But you go outside of that, that engine was manufactured in South Carolina. The transmission was manufactured in Indiana. We have different components that are manufactured in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, all over the United States. My point to this is that not only do we have a big impact here in the Permian Basin and in the state of Texas, but in the United States of America. And I just appreciate you keeping our economies open so we can succeed and provide a safe and reliable energy for not only the state of Texas, but the United States of America.
Thank you very much, Clint. And now Danny Posada, also with Cut Energy.
Thank you, Governor. I think my part is just pretty much explain for us low-level blue-collar workers that work every day in the front lines, is just pretty much to explain that, you know, we as a group, most of us travel from different places. How Clint was saying that we do have things being built other places. We have workers that travel, you know, 8 hours, 10 hours just to come to work, be away from their families. And pretty much on my personal level, it's the same thing. I'm gone from home 2, 3 weeks at a time. where I have my wife who was working is now at home taking care of my kids, going through school, homeschool. So, I mean, we do a big part for our families back home. And a lot of times, like I said, we miss our families. We are apart from them. And I thank Clint for obviously helping us out during this pandemic. Of course, we went through a lot of furloughs and cuts, but we still kept on working whatever we could to make our families, go through this pandemic and this hard time. Being with the company 7 years, I speak for most of the guys that I do work with and work under me that they are all committed to continue to work for this company and for this industry. I think this industry is important not just to Texans, but to the United States. We make a big part, and we are here to stay. That's what pretty much I need to say.
Well, Danny, thank you to you and to all the blue-collar workers here today. I'll repeat what I told you earlier, and that is when it comes to threats to your jobs, I just want you to know you have a governor who has your back and will be fighting for your jobs every single day. With that, we'll take a few questions.
Okay, and you just heard from Governor Greg Abbott and some of the workers of the oil and gas industry here today. The last thing you heard the governor say is that Texas has got a governor that has the backs of the employees of the oil and gas industry. And probably the best way that he could demonstrate that, he today signed an executive order which in rough terms gives every state agency in Texas the power or the legal power to challenge any federal action that would basically threaten the energy industry here in our area.
Yeah, he wanted to make a really good point here. When he was Attorney General and President Barack Obama was in office, we saw a lot of regulations, and he had to deal with that. And he said one of the ways that he did that was litigation. In fact, he filed 31 lawsuits against regulations that would affect the oil and gas industry. He says one of the other concerns that came out during the roundtable discussion today with oil and gas companies was that it seems to be there's a trend in neighboring states and other places where cities are placing bans on certain appliances. Let's say in San Francisco, he gave as an example, they're doing things that would basically hurt the energy industry. They're banning natural gas in San Francisco. You can't use it. Governor says if anything like that, any kind of what he calls new Green Deal hits his desk, it'll get a big fat veto on it.
That's
so.
Right.
He will not approve anything like that. He said that oil and gas workers don't have to worry about that. He's basically saying, I've got your back.
Yeah, one of the things he said early on was he said, quote, Texas will not stand idly by to see the gas industry be threatened here in our area. And he means it.
That's right. Let's check in with Jonathan Polasic. He's standing by live with more on that roundtable discussion that took place. Jonathan.
Hey, Crystal, we're out here at CUD Energy Services where Governor Abbott just finished speaking, answering some questions, or is answering some questions right now about, kind of the state of the oil industry right now. One of the big things that Governor Abbott said today was that he was signing an executive order that will challenge federal action that this threatens the oil and gas industry. He says he wants to protect jobs here in the Permian Basin, honestly, jobs here in the oil and gas industry. And he says that it's not just the federal government that's threatening the industry. He says that it's also local governments that are, causing an issue here with this oil and gas industry as well. He gave one example with San Francisco, saying that, new buildings aren't allowing for, natural gas appliances in those new buildings, stoves and things of that nature. So it's really the main point that he wanted to hammer home is that Texas, Governor Abbott, he said that Texas is going to protect the oil and gas industry as best as he can from any challenges from the federal government, local governments, wherever. That's the main takeaway from today's press conference. Crystal, Victor, back to you.
All right, thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Another big takeaway from today, which affects all of us, even if you don't work in the oil and gas industry, he says that TxDOT is working with local leaders to improve our roads. So not only can they handle that oil field traffic, it's also safe for moms, dads, and their kids.
That's right.
So,
now, A few things did come out of today's press conference that were not oil and gas related also. He said that he would like to see legislators in Texas come up with a civil liability protection bill and send it to his desk that he would sign and support also. And he also wants to make broadband accessible to everyone, because we learned during the pandemic having to do Zoom meetings and at-home schooling that broadband is very effective and very useful, and he just wants to make the availability of that stretch out even more to the people that need it.
And another thing, big thing he announced today, he says as of today, Texas has its biggest vaccination today. We vaccinated 133,459 people in one single day. So that is the largest number in one single day we vaccinated. And he says so far, more than 2 million people in the state of Texas have now received at least their first dose of the vaccine. Right. So that's something that we can all be looking forward to, getting those vaccines.
For sure.
Good news there.
Of course, we've got Jonathan and Dana out there right now. We're going to continue following the press conference and the question and answer with the governor. We're going to have complete follow-up coverage for you coming up on News West 9 at 4, also at 5, 6, and 10.
Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll return you to your regular programming.